I stood outside the empty salon on Soy Buakau at 7 in the morning, staring at the bare walls where Cherry's photographs used to hang, and I realized that everything I had built over 63 years had vanished in less than 6 months. The sign still read, Cherry's Beauty Haven in faded pink letters, but the door was locked with a rusted padlock I'd never seen before. The windows were dark and covered with dust, and the neighbors who'd smiled at me just days before now looked away as if I were a ghost haunting their street. I had wired $420,000 to the woman I called my wife, believing we were building a future together in paradise, believing that the universe had given me a second chance at love after losing Patricia. But paradise had been a carefully constructed illusion, and the woman I loved had never existed at all. The humid morning air pressed against my chest as I knocked on that locked door one more time, knowing she wouldn't answer. Knowing that somewhere far from Pattaya, Cherry was counting my money and laughing at the foolish American who'd believed every word she said. If you've been enjoying the stories I create, please consider hitting the subscribe button. Your support is crucial for the growth of this channel and helps me dedicate time to making these videos, despite my commitment to a full-time job. Thank you for being here. I need to start by telling you who I was before Thailand, before Cherry, before everything fell apart, because the man I was then would never have believed he could lose everything to a woman he'd known for 6 months. My name is Gregory Watson, though everyone back home called me Greg, and I'm 63 years old, born and raised in Austin, Texas, where I spent 35 years building a career in real estate that gave me a comfortable life I thought was unshakable. I wasn't wealthy by Texas standards, but I was stable in ways that mattered. I owned 2 rental properties that brought in steady income every month, had nearly $600,000 saved for retirement, and planned to spend my golden years traveling to all the places Patricia and I had talked about, reading the books that had piled up on my nightstand, and maybe volunteering at the local animal shelter where we'd adopted our dog 15 years ago. But stability doesn't prepare you for loss, and loss doesn't care how carefully you've planned your future. My wife, Patricia, died from pancreatic cancer 2 years before I ever set foot in Thailand, and when I say died, I mean she was ripped away from me so suddenly that I barely had time to understand what was happening. We'd been married for 38 years. She was my high school sweetheart, the girl I'd met at a football game when I was 17 and she was 16, the woman who'd stood by me through every failed business venture before real estate finally worked out, my business partner who managed our rental properties with an efficiency I could never match, my everything. When she got sick, it happened so fast that I barely had time to process it, barely had time to say all the things I should have said years before. One day, we were planning a trip to Europe for our 40th anniversary, looking at hotels in Paris and Rome, and 6 months later I was standing at her graveside in that stupid black suit I'd bought specifically for her funeral, wondering how I was supposed to continue living without her, wondering if living even mattered anymore. The grief was unbearable in ways I'd never experienced before. I stopped going to our real estate office, stopped answering calls from friends who wanted to check on me, stopped caring about the rental properties that had been our pride and joy. I spent most days sitting in our house, surrounded by her things, her reading glasses on the coffee table, her coffee mug in the kitchen cabinet, her perfume bottle on the bathroom counter, replaying memories until they became painful instead of comforting, until I couldn't remember her smile, without also remembering the way she looked in that hospital bed during her final days. My daughter, Rebecca, who lived in California with her husband and 2 kids, called me every week, increasingly worried about my isolation and my refusal to engage with life. She suggested therapy, support groups, medication, anything to get me out of that house and back into the world. She even offered to fly me out to stay with her family for a while, said the kids would love to spend time with their grandpa, but I couldn't shake the guilt that consumed me every waking moment. Patricia had wanted to travel more, to see the world beyond Texas and the annual trips we took to Colorado or New Mexico. She'd talked about Thailand, actually, about visiting the temples and beaches she'd seen in magazines. I'd always said we'd do it after retirement, after we'd saved enough, after we'd finished renovating the second rental property, after we'd secured our financial future. But after never came for Patricia. She died without seeing the places she'd dreamed about, without experiencing the adventures she'd postponed for my sake, and I was left with the hollow realization that I'd prioritized money and security over experiences and joy, that I'd wasted our time together chasing a future that never arrived. That guilt ate at me every single day, morning to night, until I felt like I was drowning in it. My friend, Carl, another retired real estate agent who'd moved to the Philippines a few years earlier with his second wife, called me one afternoon in late August and said something that changed the trajectory of my entire life. "Greg, you're dying over there, and Patricia wouldn't want that. I can hear it in your voice, man. You sound like you're already in the grave with her. Come to Southeast Asia. It's cheap, the weather's beautiful year-round, and people still know how to smile and mean it. You don't have to stay forever. Just come see what life can be like when you stop punishing yourself for being alive." I thought about it for weeks, lying awake at night, staring at the ceiling, weighing the absurdity of picking up and moving halfway around the world against the suffocating reality of staying in that house for another year, another decade. The idea felt both ridiculous and necessary, both terrifying and liberating. I'd never been the type to make impulsive decisions or take risks without extensive planning, but I also couldn't keep living in that empty house, haunted by what-ifs and missed opportunities, haunted by the ghost of the man I used to be before grief hollowed me out. So, in early September, I booked a one-way ticket to Bangkok with a plan to explore Thailand for a few months and figure out what came next. I told my daughter I needed a change of scenery, that I'd be back before she knew it, that I just needed time to clear my head. She was skeptical but supportive, though I could hear the concern in her voice when she said, "Just be careful, Dad. Don't make any big decisions while you're grieving. And please, don't let anyone take advantage of you over there." I promised her I wouldn't, promised I'd stay in tourist areas and avoid anything risky. I promised her a lot of things I didn't keep. I arrived in Thailand on a humid September morning that felt like stepping into a sauna, and within 3 days of wandering around Bangkok's chaotic streets, I'd taken a bus to Pattaya, a coastal city I'd heard was popular with expats and retirees. Carl had mentioned it in passing, said it was cheaper than Bangkok, and had a decent expat community, and something about the idea of being near the ocean appealed to me in ways I couldn't articulate. The moment I stepped off that bus and felt the ocean breeze mix with the diesel fumes and street food smells, something inside me shifted slightly. The air smelled like salt and fried fish and jasmine. The streets hummed with motorcycles and tuk-tuks and music blaring from open-air bars, and everyone I passed seemed to radiate energy, seemed to be living in a way that felt foreign to my grief-stricken existence. For the first time in 2 years, I felt something other than grief, not happiness. Not yet, but maybe the possibility of happiness. I rented a small apartment near Beach Road through an agency that specialized in helping expats. Nothing fancy, just a one-bedroom place on the 3rd floor of a slightly run-down building with a balcony overlooking the street. The rent was 12,000 baht a month, which the agent told me was roughly $350, an absolute fraction of what I'd been paying for the mortgage back home. The apartment came furnished with a bed, a small couch, a table, and a kitchen I knew I'd probably never use. It smelled faintly of mildew and old cigarette smoke, but it had air conditioning that worked, and the balcony had a view of the street life below, and that was enough. I started exploring the city, eating at street stalls where I'd point at pictures and hope for the best, walking along the beach at sunset, watching the sky turn pink and orange, and slowly allowing myself to relax into this new reality. Pattaya wasn't perfect by any stretch of the imagination. It was crowded and sometimes seedy, filled with tourists who came for reasons I didn't want to think about too deeply, filled with bars and clubs that seemed to operate on a different moral plane than anything I'd experienced in Texas. But it was also vibrant and unpretentious and alive. People didn't ask about your past or judge your choices or expect you to be anyone other than who you were in that moment. You could just exist, and that anonymity was exactly what I needed after 2 years of sympathetic looks and awkward condolences from people who didn't know what to say to a widower. I spent the first month, mostly alone, adjusting to the heat that made my shirt stick to my back, the food that sometimes agreed with me and sometimes didn't, and the culture that felt simultaneously welcoming and impenetrable. I'd wake up early before the heat became unbearable, go for walks along the beach, stop at a small cafe for coffee and a pastry, and spend the afternoons reading on my balcony while the city moved and breathed below me. It was simple, peaceful, and slowly, incrementally, I started to feel like I could breathe again without that crushing weight on my chest. But I was still lonely in ways that felt bone deep. I missed having someone to talk to, someone to share meals with, someone who cared whether I came home at night or disappeared into the ocean. I told myself I was fine, that solitude was part of healing, that I needed this time alone to figure out who I was without Patricia. But deep down, I knew I was lying to myself. I knew I was desperate for connection, desperate to feel like I mattered to someone again. And that desperation made me vulnerable in ways I didn't recognize until it was too late. It was a Tuesday afternoon in early October, and I was sitting in a small coffee shop near Beach Road, one of those places with mismatched chairs and ceiling fans that barely move the hot air around. I'd been going there almost every day for 2 weeks because the owner, an older Thai woman with kind eyes, always smiled and remembered my order. Iced Americano, no sugar. It felt good to be remembered, to be seen as more than just another tourist passing through. I was reading a book about Buddhism I'd picked up at a secondhand store, trying to understand the culture around me, trying to find some framework for the grief I was carrying. I was so absorbed in a chapter about letting go of attachments that I didn't notice someone standing next to my table until I heard a soft, melodic voice say, "Excuse me, is this seat taken?" I looked up and saw her for the first time, and I'm not exaggerating when I say my breath caught in my throat. She was stunning in a way that felt almost unreal, not in the overly made-up, obviously provocative way I'd seen in some of the tourist areas, but naturally beautiful, with long dark hair that fell past her shoulders, high cheekbones that caught the light, and eyes that seemed to hold a quiet sadness I recognized in myself. She was wearing a simple white blouse and well-fitted jeans, and she carried herself with a grace and confidence that immediately set her apart from the noise and chaos outside. She looked about 30, maybe 35, and there was something in her expression that suggested she'd experienced loss, that she understood pain. "No, please, sit down," I said, gesturing to the chair across from me, my voice coming out rougher than I intended. She smiled, a soft, genuine smile that reached her eyes, and sat down gracefully. "Thank you so much. This place is always so busy, and I hate drinking coffee alone. It makes me feel sad, you know?" We started talking, and I was struck by how easy it felt, how natural the conversation flowed. She introduced herself as Cherry, and she told me she worked as a hairstylist at a salon nearby, that she'd been doing hair for almost 10 years and loved making people feel beautiful. She asked me where I was from, what brought me to Pattaya, whether I was enjoying Thailand or finding it difficult to adjust. Her English was excellent, nearly fluent with just a slight accent that made her words sound musical, and she spoke with a warmth and genuine interest that made me feel like she actually cared about my answers, like I wasn't just making small talk with a stranger. I told her about Texas, about the real estate business I'd built, about losing Patricia, about needing a change of scenery and a break from the memories. I didn't plan to share so much personal information with someone I'd just met, didn't plan to open up about the grief and guilt I was carrying, but something about her made me feel safe, like I could be honest without being judged or pitied. She listened intently, her dark eyes never leaving my face, and when I finished talking, she reached across the table and gently touched my hand. Her touch was warm and soft, and it sent a shock through me, because I hadn't been touched with tenderness in so long. "I'm so sorry for your loss," she said quietly. "Losing someone you love is the hardest thing in the world. I understand that pain, but I think your wife would be happy that you're here, trying to live again, trying to find joy. That's what love means, right? Wanting the other person to be happy, even when we're gone." Her words broke something open inside me that I'd been keeping carefully locked away. I hadn't cried in months, had trained myself to push the emotions down, but sitting there in that coffee shop with a stranger who somehow understood, I felt tears welling up. I quickly wiped them away, embarrassed to be crying in public, embarrassed to show such vulnerability to someone I'd just met. But Cherry didn't seem uncomfortable or judgmental. She just smiled sadly and said, "It's okay to feel, Greg. That's what makes us human. If we don't feel, we're not really living." We talked for over 2 hours, long after we'd both finished our coffee. She told me about her own life, how she'd lost her parents in a car accident when she was 16 and had been raised by her grandmother in Nakhon Ratchasima, a city I'd never heard of. She said she'd moved to Pattaya 5 years ago to start her salon and build a better life, to escape the poverty of her childhood. She spoke about spirituality, about Buddhism and karma, about how the universe brings people together when they need each other most, about how everything happens for a reason even when we can't see it. I found myself hanging on every word, fascinated by her perspective, by her grace in the face of her own losses. When we finally said goodbye, she pulled a napkin toward her and wrote her phone number on it in neat, careful handwriting. She handed it to me and said, "If you ever want to talk, or if you need a friend, please call me. You seem like a good man, Greg. You are not like the others who come here. You have a kind heart, and I think you deserve to be happy again." I walked back to my apartment that evening, feeling lighter than I had in years, feeling like maybe, just maybe, the universe had given me a gift. Cherry had given me something I didn't even know I was missing: hope. I called Cherry the next day, unable to stop thinking about our conversation, and we met for dinner at a small Thai restaurant near the beach. She suggested the place, saying it was her favorite spot, somewhere locals went instead of tourists, and when we arrived, I understood why. It was quiet and intimate, with paper lanterns hanging from the trees and soft traditional music playing in the background. We sat outside at a wooden table, overlooking the water, and talked for hours about everything and nothing. She asked me about my life in Texas, about my career and the houses I'd bought and sold, about the things I regretted and the things I was proud of. I told her about the trips Patricia and I never took, about the guilt I carried for prioritizing work over experiences, about how I felt like I'd wasted so much time chasing financial security instead of actually living. I told her things I'd never told anyone, not even my daughter, not even Carl. Cherry listened without interrupting, her eyes full of empathy, and when I finished, she said something that stayed with me. "Greg, you can't change the past, but you can honor it by living the life you wish you'd lived before. Your wife would want that for you. She wouldn't want you to suffer forever. She'd want you to find joy again, to find love again, to find purpose. That's how you honor her memory." It was exactly what I needed to hear, exactly the permission I'd been seeking without knowing it. Over the next few weeks, Cherry and I started spending more and more time together. She'd take me to places tourists never saw. Hidden temples with golden Buddhas, local markets where vendors sold fresh fruit and handmade crafts, beaches far from the crowds where the water was crystal clear and the sand was soft. She introduced me to her friends, other hairstylists and shop owners who welcomed me warmly, taught me basic Thai phrases that I butchered with my American accent, and made me feel like I belonged in a country that had seemed so foreign just months before. She was patient, kind, funny, and never asked me for anything. When I offered to pay for meals or activities, she'd smile and say, "You don't have to do that, Greg. I just enjoy your company. You make me feel happy, and that's enough." But I wanted to do things for her, wanted to show my appreciation for how she'd pulled me out of my grief. She worked long hours at the salon, often starting at 8 in the morning and not finishing until 8 at night, and I could see that she struggled financially. Her apartment was small and run down, located in a neighborhood that made me uncomfortable, and she often talked about wanting to expand her business but not having the capital to do so, not having access to loans or investors. One evening in late November, over dinner at a beachside restaurant, I asked her about her dreams, about what she'd do if money weren't an obstacle. If you could do anything, what would it be? She hesitated, looking out at the ocean, then said quietly, "I want to open a bigger salon, something beautiful where people feel special, where I can hire more girls and give them good jobs. But it's just a dream. I don't have the money, and banks don't give loans to people like me, to people without education or family connections." I saw the sadness and resignation in her eyes, and I wanted to fix it, wanted to be the person who made her dreams come true. "What if I helped you?" I said, the words coming out before I'd fully thought them through. "I have savings. I could invest in your salon, help you get started." She shook her head quickly, almost frantically. "No, Greg, I couldn't ask you to do that. You've already been so kind to me. I don't want your money. I just want your friendship. You're not asking. I'm offering. I want to help you build something. I want to see you succeed." She looked at me for a long moment, her eyes shimmering with tears, and then she said, "You really mean that? You're not just saying it?" "I mean it with all my heart." She reached across the table and took both my hands in hers. "You're an angel, Greg. I don't know what I did to deserve meeting you. You've changed my life." That night, walking back to my apartment with Cherry beside me, I felt like I'd found my purpose again. I wasn't just a grieving widower anymore. I was someone who could make a difference in another person's life, someone who mattered. 3 months after we met, Cherry and I were inseparable. She stayed at my apartment most nights, and we'd fallen into a comfortable rhythm that felt domestic and real. She'd wake up early to open the salon, and I'd spend my days exploring the city or reading on the balcony or helping her at the salon, always looking forward to the evenings when she'd come home and we'd cook dinner together, trying new recipes and laughing when things went wrong. I was happier than I'd been in years, happier than I thought I'd ever be again. One night in mid-December, as we were sitting on the balcony watching the lights of Pattaya flicker in the distance like fireflies, Cherry turned to me with a serious expression I hadn't seen before. "Greg, can I ask you something important?" "Of course, anything." "Do you ever think about the future? About what happens when your visa runs out, or when you decide to go back to America? Do you think about what happens to us?" The question caught me off guard, sent a spike of anxiety through my chest. I hadn't thought seriously about leaving, hadn't considered what would happen when my tourist visa expired. Thailand had become home, and Cherry had become my life, my reason for getting up in the morning. "I don't want to go back," I said firmly. "I want to stay here, with you, for as long as you'll have me." She smiled, but there was something sad and vulnerable in her eyes. "I want that too, more than anything. But it's not easy, Greg. If you leave, or if people see us together without any real commitment, they'll talk. They'll say terrible things. They'll say I'm just using you, that I'm not serious, that I'm one of those girls who tricks foreign men. And that will hurt my business, hurt my reputation. Who cares what people say? We know the truth. I care, Greg. I care because I love you. And I don't want people to think less of you because of me. I don't want them to see you as just another stupid foreigner getting used by a Thai girl." Hearing her say she loved me made my heart swell with an emotion I thought I'd never feel again. I hadn't felt love like this since Patricia, hadn't believed I was capable of it anymore. "What if we got married?" I said, the words tumbling out before I could stop them, before I could overthink it. "What if we made it official? Then no one could say anything." Her eyes widened in shock. "Greg, are you serious? You're not just saying that?" "I'm completely serious. I love you, Cherry. I want to build a life with you here. I want to make this real and permanent. I want to wake up next to you every day for the rest of my life." She started crying, tears streaming down her beautiful face, and for a moment, I worried I'd said something wrong, moved too fast. But then she threw her arms around me and whispered against my neck, "Yes, yes, I'll marry you. I love you so much, Greg. You've saved me." We held each other on that balcony for what felt like hours, and I felt like I'd been given a second chance at happiness, like Patricia had sent Cherry to me from wherever she was. The following week, Cherry introduced me to her cousin, a man named Somchai, who she said was a lawyer specializing in property and family law. He was in his 40s, well-dressed in a crisp shirt and slacks, and spoke perfect English with barely an accent. We met at an upscale restaurant in central Pattaya, and Somchai congratulated us warmly on our engagement. "Cherry is very lucky to have found someone like you," he said, shaking my hand firmly. "Not many men would treat her with the respect and kindness you do. Most foreigners here, they just want one thing, you know? But you're different. I can see that." I appreciated his words more than he knew, felt validated in my belief that what Cherry and I had was real and special. Somchai explained that getting married in Thailand required certain documentation proof of my divorce or widowhood, translated birth certificates, affidavits from the embassy. He offered to help us navigate the legal process, said he had connections that could speed things up. He also mentioned, almost casually, that if we wanted to buy property together, it would be much easier if we were married first. "Property?" I asked, intrigued. Cherry nodded enthusiastically. "I've been thinking, Greg. If we're going to build a life together, we should have a home, not just your rental apartment, but something that's truly ours. And I could expand the salon if we had a better location, maybe even live above it so I wouldn't have to commute." It made perfect sense. I wanted to give her stability, to show her that I was committed to our future, that this wasn't just a retirement fling. Somchai pulled out some documents and explained the legal framework. "As a foreigner, you can't own land in Thailand outright. That's the law. But Cherry can. As a Thai citizen, if you invest in a property under her name and you're legally married, you'll have certain protections. I can draft the paperwork to make sure everything is legitimate and that your investment is secure." I trusted him completely. He was family, he was a lawyer, and he seemed genuinely concerned about protecting my interests. Why wouldn't I trust him? Over the next few weeks, We looked at properties all over Pattaya and Jomtien. Cherry found a beautiful house near Jomtien Beach, a 2-story place with a garden, modern finishes, and enough space on the ground floor to build a proper salon. The asking price was 8 million baht, which Samchai told me was roughly $230,000, a significant amount, but well within my budget and reasonable for what we were getting. It was a huge decision, the biggest financial decision I'd made since buying my rental properties back home. "Are you absolutely sure about this?" I asked Cherry one evening as we stood in the empty house, imagining our future there. She looked at me with those sad, beautiful eyes that had first captivated me and said, "Greg, I've never been sure about anything in my life until I met you. This is our future. This is where we'll build our life together, where we'll grow old together. I can see it all so clearly." Her certainty made me certain. I wired the money from my savings account, $230,000 transferred to Samchai's firm to handle the purchase. He assured me the paperwork would be ready within a month, that everything was being done properly and legally. We got married in early February in a small ceremony at a Buddhist temple just outside Pattaya. It was simple, intimate, and beautiful in ways that felt deeply meaningful. Cherry wore a traditional Thai silk dress in deep red, and I wore a linen suit that was far too hot for the weather, but I didn't care because I was marrying the woman I loved, and nothing else mattered in that moment. Her family attended, or people she said were her family. Samchai was there, of course, along with some women, Cherry introduced as her cousins and aunts, and a few friends from the salon. They welcomed me with open arms, called me family, and for the first time since Patricia's death, I felt like I belonged somewhere, like I was part of something bigger than my own grief. The ceremony was conducted in Thai, which I didn't understand, but the monk smiled at me kindly, and Cherry translated the important parts. We exchanged simple gold rings, and when it was over, everyone congratulated us, and we took photos in the temple garden. After the ceremony, we moved into our new house. It was everything Cherry had dreamed of, and more. She immediately started renovating the ground floor to create her salon, and I helped however I could, painting walls, assembling furniture, hanging mirrors, making sure every detail was perfect. We worked side by side for weeks, and watching her dream come to life filled me with a joy I hadn't experienced in years. She was so happy, radiantly happy. Every morning, she'd wake up with a smile and say, "I can't believe this is real, Greg. I can't believe we built this together. You've given me everything I ever wanted." I felt exactly the same way. The salon opened in early April, and it was absolutely beautiful. Cherry had named it Cherry's Beauty Haven, and she'd decorated it with taste and style, comfortable chairs, good lighting, plants in every corner, and a welcoming atmosphere that made clients feel special. She hired 2 young assistants, girls she said needed jobs and guidance, and the business seemed to thrive from day one. Within weeks, she had a steady stream of clients, both Thai women and expat wives, and she'd come home each evening excited about how well things were going. But then the expenses started piling up in ways I hadn't anticipated. Cherry came to me one evening in late May, looking stressed and worried. "Greg, I need to talk to you about the salon. We need to buy more equipment. The girls need better dryers and styling tools, and we need to renovate the upstairs apartment so we can rent it out for extra income. That will help us cover the mortgage and the salon costs." "How much do you need?" She hesitated, then said quietly, $50,000. "I know it's a lot, but it's an investment. Once everything is set up properly, the money will come back to us." It was more than I'd expected, significantly more, but I didn't want her to struggle or feel stressed. I wanted her to succeed, wanted our life together to be stable and secure. I wired the money. A month later, in late June, she needed more. She came to me with Samchai, and they explained that there was an opportunity to open a second salon location in a high-traffic area near Walking Street. This could change everything. Samchai said, "The location is perfect, right in the tourist zone, but we need to act fast because someone else is interested." "How much?" I asked, feeling a knot of anxiety in my stomach. $140,000, Cherry said. "I know it sounds like a lot, but this is our future, Greg. Once we have 2 locations, we'll have steady income, more than enough to live comfortably and pay everything back." I hesitated, looking at my dwindling bank account balance. I'd already spent $280,000, and now they were asking for more. But Cherry looked at me with those pleading eyes, and Samchai assured me it was a sound investment, and I couldn't bear the thought of disappointing her. I wired another $140,000. Within 6 months of our marriage, I'd given Cherry and Somchai $420,000, nearly everything I'd saved over 35 years of hard work. It started with small things that I tried to ignore, tried to rationalize as normal business stress. Cherry began coming home later and later, saying the salons were busy and she needed to stay late to manage the books, to train the new girls, to handle difficult clients. She stopped cooking dinner with me, claiming she was too exhausted and just wanted to sleep. When I asked how the businesses were doing, whether we were making money yet, she'd give vague answers and change the subject quickly, saying I didn't understand how business worked in Thailand, that things took time. I told myself it was just stress, that running 2 salons was overwhelming, that things would settle down soon once the businesses were established. I told myself a lot of things to avoid facing what was becoming increasingly obvious. But then she stopped coming home at all. At first, it was just one night here and there. She'd text saying she was staying at the first salon because she had early appointments, or that she was too tired to make the drive back to Jomtien. I believed her because I wanted to believe her, because the alternative was too terrifying to consider. Then it became 2 nights, 3 nights, sometimes an entire week would pass without seeing her. One night in early August, after she'd been gone for 5 days straight, I called her repeatedly. She didn't answer. I called Somchai. He didn't answer either. I left voicemails, sent text messages, tried to stay calm and rational, but panic was building in my chest like a storm. Something was very, very wrong. I drove to the salon in Jomtien, the one we'd built together in our house, the one that was supposed to be our future. As I approached, my stomach dropped. The lights were off. The door was locked with a padlock I'd never seen before. I peered through the windows and saw that the chairs, the mirrors, the equipment, everything was gone. The space was completely empty. Just bare walls and dusty floors. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I drove frantically to the second location near Walking Street, the one we'd invested $140,000 in, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. It was empty too. The sign was still there, Cherry's Beauty Haven No. 2, in that same pink lettering, but the interior was stripped bare, nothing but an empty shell. I sat in my car outside that empty salon, hands gripping the steering wheel, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Where was Cherry? Where was Somchai? Where was everything we'd built together? Where was my money? I went to the police station the next morning, barely having slept, my mind racing through every possible explanation. I brought every document I had, the marriage certificate from the temple, the property deed Somchai had given me, the bank transfer receipts showing every dollar I'd sent. I explained that my wife had disappeared, that the salons were empty, that I'd been robbed of everything. The officer, a middle-aged man with tired eyes, looked through the documents carefully and then sighed deeply. "Mr. Watson, I'm very sorry to tell you this, but the marriage certificate is not legitimate. It's a very good fake, but it's fake nonetheless." The room started spinning. What? No, that's impossible. We got married at a temple. There was a monk. There were witnesses. The temple you went to is not registered with the government. The monk who performed the ceremony is not ordained. This document has no legal standing whatsoever. You are not legally married to this woman. I felt like I was going to vomit. "And the property deed?" he continued, his voice gentle but firm. "It's also fraudulent. The house you thought you bought doesn't belong to your wife. It belongs to someone else entirely, someone who has no idea you've been living there. The signatures are forged. You've been scammed, Mr. Watson." The words hit me like physical blows. Scammed, forged, fake. None of it was real. The officer explained that Cherry, or whatever her real name was, had likely left the country already. "These operations are very sophisticated," he said. "They target foreigners, especially older men who are grieving or lonely or looking for love. They build trust over months, create elaborate stories, introduce family members who are actually accomplices. I'm very sorry, but your money is gone. These people are professionals. They've probably done this many times before." I stumbled out of the police station and sat on a bench outside, staring at nothing, my mind unable to process what I'd just learned. $420,000, gone, vanished into thin air, along with the woman I thought I'd married, the woman I thought loved me. My retirement, my security, my future, Patricia's legacy. All of it, gone. I called my daughter that night, and when I tried to explain what had happened, I broke down completely. She flew to Thailand within 3 days and helped me navigate the nightmare that followed. We hired a lawyer, filed reports, contacted the embassy, but everyone told us the same thing. The money was gone, Cherry was gone, and there was virtually no chance of recovering anything. The real owners of the house we'd been living in wanted us out immediately. I had to move my belongings into a cheap hotel while we figured out what to do next. I had roughly $25,000 left in my accounts, not enough to retire on, barely enough to survive. I'm back in Austin now, living in a 1-bedroom apartment I can barely afford. Nothing like the house I shared with Patricia. Nothing like the future I thought I was building. I had to sell both rental properties to pay off the debts I accumulated trying to chase Cherry and recover from the scam, to pay for the lawyers and the investigation that went nowhere. My daughter visits when she can, usually on weekends, bringing her kids to cheer me up, but I can see the pity in her eyes, hear the unspoken words. "I told you to be careful, Dad." She doesn't say it out loud, but she doesn't have to. I say it to myself every single day. I think about Cherry constantly, obsessively. I wonder if anything she told me was true. Was her name even Cherry? Did she lose her parents? Or was that just another lie carefully constructed to mirror my grief and create false empathy? Was any moment we shared real? Or was it all performance, all manipulation designed to separate me from my money? I don't know, and I'll never know. And that uncertainty is almost worse than knowing the truth. What I do know is this: I didn't lose my money to love. I lost it to the version of myself that couldn't let go of hope, that couldn't accept being alone, that was so desperate to feel alive again that I ignored every warning sign and every voice of reason. I was so desperate to believe that the universe had given me a second chance at happiness that I handed over everything to a stranger who saw me not as a man, not as a partner, but as a mark, as a target, as a foolish American with too much money and too much grief. Cherry saw my vulnerability and exploited it with precision and skill. She studied me, learned what I needed to hear, became exactly the person I was looking for. And I let her, because letting her was easier than facing my loneliness, easier than accepting that Patricia was gone, and no amount of money or love could bring her back. I'm 63 years old, and I have to start over with almost nothing. I took a part-time job at a real estate office, working for people I used to compete with, making a fraction of what I used to earn. I don't know if I'll ever trust anyone again, don't know if I'll ever forgive myself for being so blind, so stupid, so desperate. But I'm still here, I'm still breathing, and maybe, somehow, that has to be enough. The investigators told me that Cherry and Somchai likely ran this operation multiple times, that I was probably not their first victim, and certainly won't be their last. Somewhere out there, maybe in Malaysia or Cambodia or back in Thailand under different names, they're counting my money and planning their next con, looking for the next lonely widower or divorcee who just wants to feel loved again. And the worst part, the part that keeps me awake at night staring at the ceiling, is that even knowing everything I know now, even understanding that it was all a lie from the very first conversation in that coffee shop, part of me still misses her. Part of me still misses the woman who never existed. If this story moved you, or if you know someone who needs to hear it, please consider subscribing to this channel. These stories matter. They're real, they're painful, and they happen every single day to good people who simply wanted to be loved. Your support helps me continue documenting these cases and hopefully preventing others from falling into the same traps. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here.